And welcome back. And of course, the big focus here on SABC News throughout the day, the energy, power supply issues in the country. Now, according to the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, by February this year, a total arrears debt owed to Eskom by municipalities has escalated to 78 billion rands.
So of South Africa's 257 municipalities, 136 municipalities owed Eskom over 58 billion rand in arrears debt as of the 31st of March 2023. I mean, this as the electricity prices have now increased with an 18.65% increase. That was in April 2023, and then a further 12.74% in April 2024.
So to help us make sense of the state of the electricity and energy capabilities in our country this morning, we're joined by SABC News Specialists Researcher Velemseni Mthiyane. Now, very good morning. And of course, today, as we speak, 106 days since we last had load shedding in the country. But one of the big questions is, of course, the debt owed to Eskom, sitting at 78 billion rand. So let's go and talk about that a little bit. And also, which are some of the more prominent municipalities when it comes to this debt?
Well, good morning to you, Sakina and Leanne. And here's the challenge when it comes to the municipal debt. We will remember that last year in the budget speech, the National Treasurer gave Eskom. They took the debt of Eskom, which is more than 240 billion rands. And then there was an understanding that the municipalities that are owing Eskom will also get some debt relief. So a process was then formulated whereby the municipalities, they were made to apply. But there were conditionalities to say, if we we write your debt as the National Treasury, but you must come up with a plan. How are you going to ensure that the services of electricity are paid for by the consumers? Because there was the elephant in the room, that the consumers of electricity were not paying. So as of February this year, 72 municipalities had applied and 70 of them had been approved. Now it's with the National Treasurer to fast track the process of paying that debt relief so that Eskom will receive that money. It is clear that Eskom on its own cannot write that 78 billion rand debt. Remember what the Minister of Electricity said if this debt is unattended by 2050, it may rise to something like 1 trillion. So we are looking at a big problem. But now, will our fiscals be able to really cover all these debts? So that's where we are at the moment when it comes to the issue of these debts. So Eskom cannot write off the debts, but the National Treasury has had a program where these debts can be written off.
I want to talk a little bit about, I think, what the Minister was saying this past Monday during this particular briefing that he was giving, where we were obviously hearing about how many days we've gone without load shedding, but also just looking at the mix of energy. And Minister Ramokgopa still going ahead and saying that there is this determination to procure 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power. We do know that the Democratic Alliance are against this. So where do we stand? What's going to happen here?
Well, when it comes to nuclear, here's a challenge that South Africa has. We have an issue of a base load capacity. So that's why at times when we are experiencing load shedding, it means that our our power generators are not able to keep up with the demand. So currently South Africa has one nuclear power station, which is in Koeberg. It gives us about 1,860 megawatts when it's in full operation. And this is about 5 to 6% of what Eskom is generating. Now, if we look into the lifespan of this power station, it's coming to an end this year and next year. However, they have done some applications to extend the lifespan of this nuclear power station. It is very important also to notice that when we look at the what the minister was speaking about, to procure about 2,500 megawatts, this is going to pose a challenge on two fronts. Number one, there are activists who are saying we no longer need such a kind of an energy source. So we're going to see a lot of litigation on that. So as like DA is now going to court because they are not agreeing with this. Remember, Sakin and Leanne, that in 2019, in the Integrated Resource Plan, nuclear was not part of it. But the following year, somehow, the Minister of Electricity, of Minerals and Energy at that time, Gwedemantashe, then started to tout the idea that the government is going to procure about 2,500 megawatts of nuclear. Now, the issue is that the affordability of this, we will recall, is not the first time that South Africa wanted to build another nuclear source of power supply. During the Zuma administration, President Zuma administration, there was a lot of issues about the corruption. Now, we want to see, one, if the activists are going to take the minister to court, and we also want to see how DA is going to go about on their court, which is coming in the next few weeks. Now, that's where we are at the moment. But the country does need the base load, and if we cannot get it in coal-generated power stations, then it means somehow we need to find another base load, because the renewables, the argument is that the renewables are not able sometimes to be, they are not reliable to a certain extent. So that's where we are. But if we look, I don't know if I can move to the next point. This is where the problem is. If we look between 2014 and 2022 on our graphic, we can see that the hours of load shedding were about 7,437. That's in a period of about 9 years, or 8 to 9 years. But in 2023 alone, we see that those hours, just 1 year, there were 6,838, almost the whole year. Remember, the year has got 8,760 hours. And last year, we load shedded 6,838 hours. That's where the problem is. So if we are not looking in terms of ensuring the power generation, we will find ourselves going deeper into the problem. Because here's another challenge, is that if we look into the solar PV, for instance, the solar PV, so what we are actually getting there on the solar PV, we currently, which is not the one that is procured by the Eskom, but the one that individuals and businesses, they have put by themselves. The graphic of the solar PV, they will indicate for us that currently, as we speak, that the solar PV, they are almost equal to what the power station Kusile produces. It produces about 4,800. That's the power station of Kusile. But now, if you look at what people have installed in terms of solar PV capacity on their own, it's about 4,411 megawatts. So it means, therefore, people, the more they adopt the solar PVs, the better for the demand that Eskom is not able to meet. With this, actually this is the power station on its own, but we are currently seeing that it's not sufficient. So more needs to be done in terms of our power generation capacity.
So speaking of, it's not sufficient, Eskom says it is. Eskom says that they now, as far as the energy availability factor goes, they now have, enough electricity to supply. The problem, they say now, is that the problem lies in the municipalities when it comes to the municipal infrastructure to actually distribute, because they are now worried about substations and the like being overloaded and the damage that's being caused to their infrastructure.
Well, that's a difference between a load shedding and a load reduction. But the point I was making is that if this demand was put on the grid, definitely we will be seeing some load shedding if that demand of solar PV was on the national grid of Eskom. So, but on that point you are touching, it's very important to explain it, because when it comes to load shedding is when the national grid is not able to meet the demand. But when it comes to load reduction, that's where the distribution network is not able to cope with the demand. For instance, if a mini substation is supposed to apply about 5,000 households, and suddenly there's about 12,000 households, that mini substation runs at a risk of exploding, causing some fires, and also millions of rands in terms of damages. So that's where we are. But again, if we look at the energy mix that we are at, if we look in terms of the total system demand, coal, like last year, this is a figure for last year, financial year, we were sitting at about 73%. And then the renewables, this is, they are at 8.7. Remember, in 2020, for the first time, the renewables overtook nuclear. Now, if we add that capacity, that proposed capacity of nuclear, then we see that nuclear may go to be above renewables energy. That's where the bone of contention will be with some activists, environmental activists, who are going to say, but why we are not putting more effort in renewables instead of saying we are going to put nuclear? Government has done extremely well when it comes to advancing and adopting renewables energy. But the issue again is that the nuclear will cause a problem for government in terms of, as I said, the activists and some political parties who are against the adoption or the addition of the nuclear power.
All right. We've got more that'll be coming up here on the program when we talk to the electricity, where we're at the moment, and South Africa's state of the grid. So do stay tuned in the next, I suppose in about the next 10, 15 minutes. We're going to be joined by our analyst. I'm trying to get to the name, but anyway, it's coming up on the program. We'll get there a little bit later on. But Veli, thank you, giving us a great indication as to where we are at the moment and how the situation is with the balance of energy and municipalities, load shedding, load reduction, all of these kind of things. We're going to focus more on that in our next interview here on the program.